Welcome everyone to ICAN. Today's show will be about drug abuse and recovery. Illicit drug use is directly and indirectly responsible for over 750 deaths per year. It is also responsible for 585,000 premature deaths by increasing the risk of particular disease and injury. Over 166,000 people die from drug overdoses each year. But in this madness, there are stories of recovery. My mission with this show is to hopefully help increase those stories of recovery by helping share information and sharing these stories. Addiction not only affects the person, it affects their family, friends, and their community. There is hope out there if only you reach out for it. On today's show, I will be interviewing a young woman who has turned her life around full circle. I hope her story will help those out there who need help to realize that they are not alone and they can, with time and hard work, make their lives whole again. Today we will talk with Emily Reich, who is addicted to drugs. But through her determination and hard work, she was able to change her life. She is now a peer specialist with NAMI. There is help out there from people who know what you have gone through, so never give up.
Open our hearts, free every soul. The fear inside, you must let it go. Oh, that monster, before it conquers you. Yeah, we all have demons, we fight every day. You get knocked down, but the bell hasn't rang, so keep going. Just stay focused when life seems hopeless. Before life passes you by, you must, like a bird with broken wings always. You've gotta reach for the stars. It might seem far. Ooh, don't stop. You gotta try. Oh, 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 you gotta try. Never stop dreaming, even awake. Nothing can stop you from winning this race, so keep going. Just stay focused. Yeah, I am the tiger, I own the prize. Every storm is with the rainbow in the sky. You are golden. If no one else noticed, don't stop, keep going. Before life passes you by, you must, like a bird with broken wings always. You gotta reach for the stars. It might seem far. Ooh, don't stop. You gotta try. Oh, 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 you gotta try. You gotta try. All you got to do is try. Oh, you gotta 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 try. You gotta try. All you got to do is try. You gotta try.
I think the biggest piece of advice I have for someone going through addiction or thinking about going to rehab is being honest with yourself. Don't be afraid to get help. I think that's the biggest stigma that we're trying to erase is don't be afraid to ask for help.
Welcome back to ICAN. I'd like to introduce Emily Reich. She's a ex-drug addict and a NAMI. She's now a NAMI peer advocate, and I'd like her to tell you her story.
So my name's Emily Reich. I am 35 years old. I'm a recovering addict and alcoholic. I have 2 daughters. I just recently moved out to, kind of recently. Last summer I moved out to Oconomowoc, but since then I was born and raised in Watertown, Wisconsin. Kind of a bit of my using history, I guess, would be, started off with smoking cigarettes and pot at the age of 14 is when it became a pretty consistent using.
But you actually started at 11, you said?
Yeah, I think I smoked my first cigarette at age 11. Just, I don't know if you'd say that rebellious side of me. I also talked about piercing my nose, which is still pierced to this day, but I remember hiding up in my parents' bathroom when I was 14 years old, and me and my cousin were sitting up there, and I shoved a earring through, and knew my parents weren't going to be happy about it, and we had like some big bonfire, pig roast, or some event, and I just took off out of the house and left before anybody even noticed, kind of type thing. But at 14 is when I really, looking back, I see that, that was a kind of pivotal age in my life where I could have went this way or this way, and I decided to go, the opposite way I should have. In middle school, I was, on honor roll, maybe even high honor roll, I don't even remember, but, I was a good student and was active in sports and extracurricular activities. And when I got to high school, at that point, I think it was like the summer before my freshman years when I started experimenting with weed and, sneak in beers and stuff with my friends and when we'd have our little sleepovers or whatever. And I remember getting to the high school and you would have to sign a red card to be in any sports. And that was pretty much giving, the coaches or any authority permission to randomly drug test you if they had a suspicion and you couldn't, get caught at parties or anything like that. So that was my excuse not to join sports and any of that stuff. So
was there something that turned you to that besides just peer pressure?
Looking back, like I remember my one friend, like I was the one pressuring her to try smoking weed with me for the first time. And I had an older brother who was kind of into that stuff. He was 3 years older than me, so at that time he was already, halfway through high school, had a license, and I kind of just, I don't want to say followed in his footsteps, but for me it was something that, not knowing what these drugs or anything would do to me, like that curiosity, I think, that is really why I got into it in the first place.
Okay.
I can't really say. Like I had, growing up, I consider my childhood pretty average. My parents are still together to this day. I was a middle child. I have an older sister, older brother, then it's me, and then I have a younger brother. And my 2 brothers had followed somewhat similar paths as me, which is kind of, if you think about it, so I consider my sister my sister. We do have different dads, so I don't know if genetics has some kind of play in there.
Is there alcoholics or people in your family that
they might not identify as addicts or alcoholics, but there's definitely on both sides, my mom's side and my dad's side,
Okay.
people that have struggled. You know, on my dad's side, I mean, he's got 10 sisters, so I have a lot of cousins
wow.
and stuff like that. And besides me, I know of one cousin that is active in the 12-step community. She actually moved down south, but her and her husband are very active in the Narcotics Anonymous down in, I think, Tennessee.
Okay.
I think that's where they're living. But you know, it's funny because between me and my two brothers, like we've all taken different paths to find sobriety in our lives, and that's kind of come up in my family time and time again. Because for me, there's like I've tried a lot of things that have not worked as far as sobriety and being happy. I've tried just staying abstinent, and a lot of people refer to that as like a dry drunk, and I was just not a nice person at all, kind of white knuckling it, as they say. But at the same time, you know, my family, now that I am clean and sober, like they want to spend time with me. But for me to remain sober and keep sobriety, I've learned that I have to stay active and, you know, have commitments, be involved in service work, working with others. So I'm constantly like doing something
for somebody else, so you're not thinking about yourself?
Yes. It's always kind of go, and you know, they don't. Why do you always got to go to these meetings, or, you know, why are you always trying to help all these people? And for me, I've learned that when I'm not doing those things is when I can get in a really
Bad place.
scary place.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's.
Looking over your bio, you went through a lot of different drugs.
I did, yes. In high school, I kind of met an older guy when I think I was.
You said 16.
Yes, 16 years old, because I may have fibbed a little saying I was like almost 18 or something, because he was older. I want to say he was like 19 or 20 at the time, maybe. And that boyfriend had kind of introduced me to the life of raves and mushrooms and ecstasy and this whole psychedelic world where.
So that was about in the 80s, wasn't it? Or the 70s? No, 80s. You're not that old.
No, oh, right. Yeah, when that really took over. Yeah, it's. I don't know. For me, it's definitely something that. The few times, as far as like mushrooms go, I've had a couple bad trips, as they say. The last 2 or 3 times, thankfully, and for me that helps with never wanting to do it again, because it like kind of scared me straight as far as mushrooms go and not wanting to take them. However, that wasn't the case for all these other drugs. I remember at a point, I want to say like the summer after my junior year, before my senior year started, is when we would throw like these underground rave parties, go to underground raves, and there was like my boyfriend at the time had some connections up by Wausau, and he was from way up north, so he kind of had friends all over the state. And I remember driving up to Wausau and getting, it was a jar they call it, or did at the time. I don't know what any of the drug lingo is these days, which
That's
is okay
good.
with me.
Yeah.
But we picked up a decent amount of ecstasy pills, and there was like a period where we did ecstasy for like a month straight.
Oh.
And coming off of that, it messes with your dopamine levels, like your feel-good levels, and people tend to get super depressed after, taking something like that for so long. So it was just like a wave of emotions up and down for a long time, that whole summer pretty much with all the things we did. I continued to smoke weed probably daily at that point for a while. That boyfriend ended up getting busted. I actually remember the Watertown Police Department raided his duplex, his mom's duplex, and I remember being so cocky to them and like thinking.
Did you go to jail also?
No, I didn't go to jail, but I got an underage drinking ticket,
Okay.
and I remember they kind of like emptied out my purse, and in one of the pockets I had a little container where I would keep my marijuana pipe and my weed, and I remember them dumping it out, and there was a bunch of like shake and everything, and they tried charging me. I think they did charge me with that, but since I was a minor, I think
They dropped it, yeah.
right. But I remember, because at that time he had went and picked up a large quantity of marijuana and had it hidden, and they found it. And at the time we had some really good stuff that we just kept in a little pill bottle, and I remember going back the next day and finding that pill bottle full of pot, and I was like, they didn't get it all. But that was my mentality back then. So he ended up going away for like 5 months, I think it was. And during that 5 months, my boyfriend at the time had lost a really good friend over some coke deal gone bad, and was like shot in the face and lost his life. So for that reason, he had hated cocaine as a drug, just hated cocaine, and was totally against it and totally against me ever doing it. So when he went away to jail is when I was presented with trying that, and it was kind of like, love at first sight or whatever. It was something that I really liked how it made me feel, and liked how social it made me, and kind of how alcohol gives you that liquid courage.
Yep.
is what I felt cocaine did for me. So there was that. Ended up dropping out of high school a month before graduating and running away to Arizona with this boyfriend once he was out of jail. And we ran away because he had warrants out for his arrest again and didn't want to get revocated, and that's why we took off to Arizona. He had a
Okay.
friend out there, and during our relationship, he had been mentally abusive, sexually abusive. I remember instances when he would like dump a full can of beer over my head in front of my friends because I undermined him or something like that. The whole time too, before we went to Arizona, it got to the point where it was me, him, and another friend of ours, and every day after work, this friend would bring a 30-pack, usually like PBR or Bush or something like that, and the three of us would drink every night and just get totally annihilated, and that's where a lot of the mental abuse came from, because we were just both so insecure and untrustworthy that it spiraled into our relationship. So when we moved out to Arizona, I turned 18 in March, and that May is when we decided to leave. And I was only out there for about 3 months. In the time that we were out there, You know, we were, again, daily pot smokers, daily drinkers. I remember just getting completely annihilated drunk. And that's when things started to get really physically abusive. I remember getting my first black eye, and just, I still can vividly remember some of the instances where we were both just physically abusive towards each other.
Now, looking at your excuse me, bio, you said OxyContin is the one that really.
That's the one that came into play after I came home from Arizona. I was introduced to another guy, and this guy, we started dating, and shortly after that, I found out he was a coke dealer, which was a plus for me because that was a drug I liked. He was the one to introduce me to OxyContin for the first time, and for me, I don't know. When I would use it, it felt like a warm hug is how I can best describe it. Just constantly in a state of, you know, just everything
Euphoria.
felt good. Yeah. Euphoria. You know, and at the time I wasn't thinking like, oh, I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna be addicted, you know, like that's not the thought process that most of us addicts have. It was that warm fuzzy feeling that you just keep searching for. I wasn't aware of the physical withdrawals that drug brings with it. There was a period of time where, because the guy I was dating was a coke dealer and was, you know, pretty good at what he did at the time anyway, that we didn't really have to worry about money. The only thing we had to worry about was everybody was finding out what Oxy was and getting into it. Like, it got harder and harder to find the pills, which, I mean, fast forward a little bit, we ended up going to the methadone clinic in Waukesha. Oh, geez. To go there, they have different levels that you can be at, and you typically have to drive there every day, take your dose in front of them, and then go home. On the weekends, you'd bring in a lockbox, and they would give you your weekend dose until you're able to phase up and you know, take more doses home at once. But this was something that we did for months and would go every morning, and by the time we'd get back on the interstate to drive back to Helenville, we would both be nodding off at the wheel on I-94. Like, I remember so vividly waking up to just horns blasted near us and like looking up and seeing him nodded off at the wheel, and like you would think that'd be enough to ask yourself like, what the heck am I doing with my life? Like, what is going on? But for me, I was in such a, you know, I didn't.
Denial.
I didn't care. My family, I remember my mom and sister, you know, they knew something was up, and they didn't, I don't think they knew how bad it was, but they definitely knew I had a problem. And I remember them coming to get me one day when he was at work, and I packed up all my stuff and just left. But during that relationship, being daily cocaine users, we got to the point where that wasn't doing it for us anymore. And that's when we would start to cook it and turn it into crack cocaine, and that was like a whole new love. And I don't know, I think to this day, even though it's a more pure form of cocaine, like, it still has, like, to say that I was a crackhead has such a nastier, like, people just look way, compared to saying like, oh yeah, I've done blow before, you know, it has that stigma with it still. I mean, in my opinion, it's all bad, but it's still like, it's a more pure form of cocaine, and yet people look at it as, a poverty drug or
Yeah.
whatever.
Tell me about your first attempt at getting and staying clean.
So my first attempt was shortly after getting out of that relationship.
And that was in 2010.
2010, it was in May of 2010. I know this thankfully because I went to Rogers for detox out in Oconomowoc, and I did their intensive outpatient program, their IOP. And that's where a lot of information from my bio came, because they have you do a lifeline of your drug history and then like the emotions that go with it. And thankfully I saved that because I'm really bad with dates and all of that. So I probably blame that on my drug use, my bad memory. But my first attempt was definitely to get my family off my back.
No other reason?
I was willing to admit that I had a problem with drugs and alcohol. After I turned 21, I found out that alcohol too, I can't drink that normally either. But it was more to just put my mother's mind at ease and there may have been a little smidge of wanting sobriety, but at the same time, I thought life was going to be so lame, and how are you going to have fun without drugs and alcohol? And it unfortunately didn't last long, but that is what had introduced me to Alcoholics Anonymous, which at that time there were a few NA meetings out in Oconomowoc, Narcotics Anonymous, which is more for, so Narcotics Anonymous is, the desire to quit any mood or mind-altering substance. So alcohol's kind of included with that, along with anything else. Whereas Alcoholics Anonymous, back at that time, the old timers they talk about, if you would identify as an addict, they would kind of look at you different. I've been in meetings where members of AA have said, and this isn't all members, it's just some, but back in those days, well, you don't belong here, there's nothing we can do for you here, we're alcoholics. If you didn't add the addict and alcoholic, you were looked at differently, which is crazy, because it's supposed to be a place where
for help
you can feel safe, yeah. But that's what introduced me to 12-step recovery, was going to detox, IOP, and then meeting my first ever sponsor at Rogers. She came and spoke, and to this day, she gave me a few years ago, I think I should say, she gave me her 25-year coin. And I remember her telling me that I could hold on to it, and I could give it back to her once I got 25 years. And it's something I still carry with me in my purse always.
Is she still your sponsor?
She is not. She's actually currently dealing with a lot of health issues right now, and since COVID, it's I was able to connect with her a while back and try to still stay in touch. But after the last time I spoke to her, I was kind of just thinking, of all the years prior and some of the things that she had told me that at the time didn't mean nearly as much as they do today. Now that I finally get it, I guess you could say, and that my eyes have been opened to my own to my own BS. I don't know if I could say that, but my own junk.
Yeah. Let's fast forward on to 2017.
Yes. So there's quite a bit that happened in those 7 years. In and out of 12-step recovery, met the father of my children, had 2 daughters, was engaged to marry the father of my children. He would have had, I believe, 7 years sobriety, and ended up relapsing when I was pregnant with my second daughter. And after having my second daughter, I joke because I know this isn't the same for all women, but for me, when I was pregnant, thank God that was one of the easiest times for me to remain sober. But I can't be pregnant my entire life. So.
Well, that's because you have to think
Right.
of somebody else.
But I joke about that because I say like, oh, if I could just be pregnant my whole life, I'd be good. But yeah, it doesn't work that way, nor would I that's probably a lie, because if I had that many kids, who knows?
Yeah. Well, and it says here that your mother threatened to take your children away?
Yes, so in 2017, their dad had left May of 20, well, actually, it was ironically Father's Day 2016 that he left. Me and him ended up relapsing together after I had my second daughter. Within a matter of 3 months, we lost everything, and our disease of addiction progressed very quickly. We lost a lot in a short amount of time, and things went from bad to worse in a short amount of time. So he had left. I told my mom what was going on, that we were both using together, and I went to detox. And I was only in detox for less than a week. I got out, and for whatever reason, well, I know what reason, because I didn't work any kind of program. I didn't stay connected to anyone in recovery. I was, still trying to do it on my own or my way. So Memorial Day of 2017, I was at a family reunion where my parents had brought my daughters there. I came from my drug dealer's house, high on crack cocaine, drinking from the night before, and high on heroin. And, I thought I had everybody fooled. And I was just a complete mess. Well, I somehow managed to leave with my older daughter, who was 4 at the time. So we take off. I'm driving intoxicated on Highway Y, somewhere between Helenville and Watertown. Somebody had called my plates in because I was driving erratically. And my daughter, who's now almost 9, still brings this up to this day about me going in the grass. So I got pulled over. I had gotten my second OWI, and that was my I got my first and second within like months of each other. So after that point, my family, who was also coming back from this family reunion, had to come and get my daughter. The Jefferson County deputy took me to the Watertown Hospital because I was not nice either. I definitely remember not being nice to him because I wouldn't take a field sobriety test because I told him, like, listen, I'm not drunk, I'm high on heroin, why do I have to do this, and it made it a big deal in my head and to him, and I just remember being so mean about it. So they took me to the hospital to draw my blood. I sat in the Jefferson County Jail like over the weekend. But that was the very last day that I had done heroin. So I continue, I consider, I can never remember if it's May 30th or 31st, so I just go with June 1st of 2017. So I just celebrated 5 years clean from heroin because after that, my mom threatened to she took temporary custody of my kids and threatened that if I couldn't keep my crap together for the next 90 days, she was going to take permanent custody of my kids. And for me, and again, I'm not saying this is the same for everybody, but for me, it was enough to make me take a deep, hard look and realize, like, okay, this isn't just my life that I'm messing up now. I have these 2 innocent girls who don't have a dad. I'm their only constant right now, and at that time, I wasn't very constant myself. Thought I was doing okay, but I was fooling myself as well. And that ultimately is what got me back into the rooms of AA and NA. I was also able to get into Jefferson County's drug treatment court program,
Okay.
which at the time was only they've had alcohol treatment court in Jefferson for years, but did I say that right? Alcohol court's been here for a while, but drug court was new to Jefferson County. So all my court stuff kept getting pushed back so that I could get into drug court. And thankfully I did, because I attribute that along with 12-step recovery to saving my life. You know, even in all the years that I had tried getting clean and sober before, I still had that obsessive thinking. Like, I still would wake up every day and have to like give myself a pep talk, like, you know, how are we gonna make it through the next 24 hours clean and sober? Like, how are we gonna do this? And I just thought that like I was one of the hopeless ones that was just gonna have to live my life like that. I knew at the time that it was better living it that way, being surrounded by people trying to move forward in life, trying to work on themselves, trying to be, you know, a contributing member, functioning member of society, than it was just white knuckling it and trying to do it on my own, because that just never worked. So that's kind of what led me back into the rooms of NA and AA. And since then, I know at least out in Watertown, we now have 3 NA meetings that I know about.
Okay.
When I first tried getting clean back in 2010, that is when we started our first ever NA meeting out here. And I remember getting to be a part of that and kind of, you know, chairing meetings and stuff like that. So
I'd like to have you share that information with me, and I'll add it to the end of our show.
Okay, yeah. I know there's a Monday night meeting, and
That's okay. You can email it to me.
Okay, I will. Yeah.
How do you think this all affected your girls?
Well, I can honestly say that I can't say, because it's having lasting effects. You know, that accompanied with their dad kind of being in and out. He actually just graduated from Waukesha's drug treatment court this past Wednesday, and me and both my daughters got to be there to support him and be there to see him graduate, because after going through treatment court out in Jefferson County, I've said that like anybody that's able to complete that program successfully, like, my hat's off to them. It's one of the hardest things, aside from getting clean, aside from childbirth and those kind of things, like one of the hardest things I've had to do in my entire life, the accountability and requirements that you have to complete, all while not having a license. And a lot of the people that are in those kind of programs usually don't have the best relationships with families. They like me, I burnt a lot of bridges by that point in my life, and thankfully my family was still there to support me. And if they weren't, I probably would never have graduated that program and probably wouldn't be sitting here today.
So what has worked for you the best?
Well, for me, you know, in all the years trying to get clean and in and out of 12-step recovery, there was times when I really, really wanted it, and times where I got a sponsor, I worked the steps, I committed to service work, and I still had that obsessive thinking. And I don't know if it was just because, you know, I wasn't where I needed to be for things to click. I joke because, and I like sharing this because it's a story of humility. I remember at one point I was chairing meetings out in Oconomowoc at Lake Area Club, and I remember telling the father of my children, because he was active in NA as well, I remember saying, like, you know, the people that have to come and get their paper signed, like, they don't really want to be here, they just have to be here. And then I became one of those people, and I wanted to be there more than any other time in my life. Like, I wanted it more than ever. And I attribute that to my higher power and having, you know, having jokes.
How important is a spiritual life or higher power?
For me, it's extremely important. It was something that I really struggled with for a very long time, and a lot of us addicts and alcoholics like to complicate things, and that was one thing that I needed these definite answers. And in AA especially, you hear God a lot. And then they also say that it's a spiritual, not religious program. However, my mind, when I hear God, I automatically think religion. And just some situations that happened in my childhood and growing up, and people and churches, and that kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. And I know it scares a lot of people when they are sitting in a meeting and they do hear God. Like, that can be really intimidating for a lot of people. My entire life, I didn't, I really struggled with believing there was something, but not knowing, if it was God, not believing in the Bible, and all those kinds of things. But I can say, like, for me, it's really simple. Like, my higher power is God, and God to me is exactly whatever I need him, her, it to be, period. They also talk about being open-minded and willing in 12-step recovery. And I have to say, I was in a meeting, a work meeting the other day, and so as I got certified as a peer specialist, they really touch on that sobriety, recovery looks different. 12 steps don't work for everybody, I get that, but for me, that is my experience, and that is what worked for me, and that's my truth. And I was in a work meeting the other day, and I'm pretty sure it was a woman of a supervisor position that was basically talking down and kind of putting all of 12-step recovery people in one group, saying, that we're closed-minded to other ways of recovery. And I can speak from my own experience that I am not naive to think that this is the one and only way that people can get sober. So I did get a little upset about her judgment towards that, and as she's trying to say the exact opposite, that she's so open-minded and willing, but calling all, I don't know.
For my final question, what is 13-stepping?
Oh, geez, it's a funny one. And it comes up a lot in recovery. 13-stepping, it's kind of a funny question. So there's only 12 steps in AA and NA.
Right.
And 13-stepping would be classified as pretty much somebody coming in, looking to hook up, looking to get into a relationship. Yeah, a lot of times it's people preying on somebody vulnerable that is just coming into the program, and none of us are perfect, and that does happen. And I find that as a woman in recovery, that we kind of have to band together because we are a smaller group, and there is, at least out in this area, in my opinion, there is a lack of female presence. With sponsorship, there's not a lot of options for women. So just to speak up when you see things like that, and and I mean, it can happen to guys too, but it's definitely a thing, and there's still a lot of very spiritually sick people in the world.
Yeah, there is. Before we head out, is there anything else you'd like to share that to help those people out there?
I mean, just for me, I guess I really thought I was one of the hopeless ones that was never going to get it, and they talk about it in 12-step literature, both AA and NA, and I'm proof that you can recover from a hopeless state of mind. So if you are struggling, please reach out. We are losing way too many lives right now to this
295
disease.
people a day.
Yeah, so recovery is possible.
Thank you so much for your story.
I'm glad you had me.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.